Sphinx. Sphinx? Sphinx. Thank you, my beloved PyCon, for letting me talk about Python and the web and something old and marvelous, Sphinx. Thank you, audience, for joining me. Why am I outside? Well, it's kind of nice out here. But also, I wanted you to think a little bit more about storytelling. Instead of thinking about the slides, let's go on a little bit of a journey. All the software details are available online anyway. Instead, let's go for a walk through Sphinx. Static websites, Sphinx, Markdown. Now, I'm making a static website. It's going to be Markdown, it's going to be Python, obviously. Images, kind of easy. It's Markdown after all. Just put a URL, some brackets and stuff. I'm also going to have a role that links to a remote heading. I'm going to put in a toctree. I'm going to render it, see how it looks. Wait a second. That's not Markdown. That's Sphinx. Hi, I'm Paul Everitt, Python oldster, JetBrains developer advocate. Today, we're going to be showing Sphinx, but with Markdown. Thanks to MyST, the executable books project, and the myst-parser, which brings Markdown to Sphinx. Sphinx is a static site generator in SSG. What is that? And why should I care? Good question, because I care a lot, maybe a little bit too much. And it's tied to Python and the modern web. Let's take a look. Back in the good old days, emphasis on old, we had HTML files on disk. Had a URL, pointed to a file, had HTML in it. Pretty simple. Even back in the very beginning, though, some of those HTML files at a URL were actually served by an application. And instead of serving up a file on disk, it would dynamically generate the HTML. And these were thought of as kind of web applications. The HTML would be rendered on the server, and so you had SSR, server-side rendering. You also had things that were hybrids, like Sphinx, actually. It was a Python application that would run, generate all those HTML files for you. You didn't have to edit them by hand. It would generate them based on the data that you provided, reStructuredText files. All was good in the garden, but then a snake arrived. Single-page applications, SPAs. And this was where JavaScript stuck its head in, and people started writing a little bit of interactivity on the client. At first, all we used the JavaScript for was a little bit of interactivity to spice up a button, validate a field, but then we moved the whole UI over to the browser, written in JavaScript. Python folks were like, we're okay with that. We'll keep Python on the server to generate the data. Well, then the SPA folks had a little bit of a problem. Their search engine optimization was terrible. Time to interactive was too low on the critical rendering path, so they started pre-rendering the HTML on the server, which meant you needed JavaScript on the server, leaving not enough room for Python. And this becomes a big worry for me, Python and the modern web, replacing Python with JavaScript on the server. Let's have a better understanding of what we have in Python and what we need. Back to Sphinx. Sphinx is a tool traditionally thought of for docs. There are other choices. You can use MakeDocs, also written in Python. Pretty cool project. For static websites, the topic of this talk, we have other choices in Python as well. Pelican, probably the biggest known choice. Nicola, one that has some interesting characteristics for really big sites. And Lecter, a little bit newer than the others, has a little bit more structure. And then we have some non-Python ones. Jekyll, most known for its connection to GitHub and being kind of old, being around a while on this. Hugo, written in Go, super fast. And then the one I've been spending a lot of attention with recently, Gatsby, kind of an exemplar of this modern web approach. Sphinx is a Python application. How does it work? You point it at a big pile of files. It runs some application code, generates a big pile of output files, a static website. Now, I confess, I care about this a lot, probably a little more than is healthy. let's go ahead and jump directly into using Sphinx with Markdown. Getting Sphinx and Markdown set up is about what you'd expect. It's Python. As you can imagine, Sphinx, pretty well explained as a website, got good docs, shocking development. Installing Sphinx, also pretty easy. Lots of different ways, documented, conda, etc. For normal Python usage, pip, install Sphinx. Pretty simple. It'll get all the dependencies and install them. One of the things that Sphinx will do when you pip install it, it will generate a command line application called Sphinx-Quickstart. You can read about the options on it, but this is a scaffold. It will generate all the files needed for your site and a couple of example pages to help you get started. Well, that's getting Sphinx installed. But how about for Markdown? This is where we go to the myst-parser project. It also has a good website. It also has really good docs. Love to see that in a project. Installing Myst, also pretty simple. Pip install myst-parser. It gets a few dependencies, including the Markdown parser that they wrote for the project. Then after you have Myst installed, you need to go to your Sphinx configuration file, conf.py, and enable it. It isn't enough to just install it in your, hopefully, virtual environment. You need to tell Sphinx that it's there. Once you have this done in the conf file, you can start using Markdown in Sphinx. Seems kind of really crazy and impressive, but it works immediately. How would you go ahead and start doing this? One of the things Sphinx Quickstart generates is a index.rst. How about we change it to a index.md? But that's not enough to just rename it to .md. The contents still have restructured text. Go in, change the contents to look like Markdown. This actually brings up an interesting point. You can have Myst in your site. You can have Markdown files in your site. They can still sit side by side with your restructured text files so that you can gradually, bit by bit, switch over to using Markdown. Now, one last part about this, let's talk about how this works. What is myst-parser really doing here? Little known fact, Sphinx, which sits on top of restructured text, which is in docutils doesn't require restructured text. Kind of a surprise. It just happens to be the one and only parser syntax format that has been implemented so far. So the Myst folks went in, created a new docutils parser for Markdown instead of restructured text. When you go on the other side of it, restructured text and Sphinx don't know that it wasn't restructured text on the other side. It's a docutils parser. Once you do this, et voila, you're making a website. The website is in Markdown and it's in Sphinx. It's Markdown's world. We're all just living in it. Markdown, really popular, really simple. But what is Markdown? Let's take a look at kind of simple Markdown in Myst and thus in Sphinx. We'll go over some basic formatting. Here you can see a heading with a single hash in front of it. You can see a paragraph, just blank lines, things that you would expect from restructured text as well. You can see an unordered list. You can see a link, which is a notably different syntax. I'd say easier syntax than in restructured text. If you're familiar with Markdown, you're probably familiar with Markdown Images, another really simple syntax. One of the reasons people prefer Markdown over restructured text. Even this, though, kind of begins to get us into the, why is this really cool? Because what Myst is doing with this simple Markdown text and pumping it into Sphinx is a lot more than you'd expect. Why do I say that? You can generate a PDF that includes that image that you put in using that Markdown tag. There's a little bit more you can do with images than just that single line format. You can do an enhanced image syntax that lets you put in some arguments and some options. Really what you're doing here is just using Markdown as a thin veneer over the directive in Sphinx. Sphinx has this cool construct called admonitions, warnings, notes, info, danger, things like that. You can do those with the Markdown syntax as well. This directive introduces one more piece beyond the directive argument options. It also has a body, and the body is in Markdown. That's what's going to go in that box. Admonitions also have an enhanced flavor thanks to MyST. This is turned on in the comp file if you want it. It's a colon syntax. Why? So that you can have the Markdown body in the directive rendered in some tools. Like here you see in my IDE, we're actually rendering the Markdown so that you can see it okay. Take a look at another thing that's important in Sphinx, a toctree. How does that look in Markdown? About like what you would expect. Here's an example though of providing your options to your directive instead of with the colon syntax from Sphinx and reStructuredText using YAML. That's a really cool thing from MyST, allowing you to provide your arguments using YAML. So simple Markdown is simple, about what you'd expect when you're in MyST. But remember, this is just a thin veneer over the directives that you get in Sphinx. And all these map with directive, arguments, options, body. Content-rich sites have a lot of structure, including links. Sphinx has always been great at this with some surprising features that people coming from other static site generators really aren't expecting. Let's take a look at how linking surfaces, Sphinx linking surfaces, when you're using MyST and Markdown. Simplest example, external URL, pretty simple. You just put the URL in the brackets, you put the link text in front of it, we're all good. Internal URL, pretty similar. Instead of HTTP colon blah, 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 you just put some kind of path. This will also tell the static site generator to copy that file to the output so that you've got it in your build directory. Now, here's a cool one. And when I give tutorials on this, it always kind of surprises people. This is an example of doing a link pointing to the path, nothing in the link text. Where does the link text come from? Sphinx has structure, the thing I like the most about Sphinx. It knows the thing you're pointing at. It knows the title of the thing you're pointing at. And it will put that title in the link text. And that's really helpful. Really cuts down the work. What if you point at something that doesn't exist? You point to a page in your site and you've renamed that page later. A lot of these other systems, they won't warn you about it. You have to go write some kind of script to go check all of your links. Sphinx knows your structure. It knows you're pointing at something that doesn't exist. It will give you a warning on that. Now, into the part, it's kind of freaky, but really useful when you're building a knowledge base. What if you want to point not to a document, but to a place in a document, like a heading? In Sphinx, these are called roles. You can define a role somewhere in a document and then link to it. So in the other side, maybe above the heading, you would put this little syntax and you've introduced new structure into your site, not just the file name, but the part of the file name. And it becomes a linkable target. Like the other things we just talked about, what if you, when you're linking to it, don't want to put the link text? You want to say, whatever the heading has, go use that as the link text. You betcha. Sphinx or MyST will let you do that. What if you want to override the link text from the thing that's over there? There's a syntax for that. If you've used Sphinx, you'll probably be familiar with it. Now, on to the one, I think roles are pretty freaky, but Intersphinx is really freaky. When you're building a site of sites, a network of sites, maybe you'd like to be able to link to something out there. The Python docs, the Sphinx docs, the MyST docs, your corporate site's website. You can have symbols defined over there and use this Intersphinx thing to go load those symbols locally and make them roles as if they were local to your website. Really useful. And when you're building one of these networks, I don't really think that any of the other static site generators even try to do this. So Sphinx linking, really the thing that I love about Sphinx, really useful, really powerful when you're making knowledge bases and things like that. MyST has a whole bunch of syntax for making that friendly in Markdown. We're talking about websites, not docs, and sometimes, especially in our field, we have a big knowledge base and it's got some code in it. we need to show snippets of that code along with the information on our website, the content, the docs, and things like that. Sphinx is great at this. It's been great at this for a long time. But how does it look in Markdown? If you know Markdown, you know about code fences. They're kind of the same idea in Sphinx with MyST. Triple backticks, you put your code in. By default, it's Python 3, I believe, is the syntax that it's using. Code fences can go a little bit further than just this basic syntax, and you can say that this is the language of the code that's in the code fence. And if you look closely, the curly brackets, it says code block, which kind of gives the game away. This is just what we talked about before, a directive that's being surfaced in MyST using the curly brackets. It has an argument after it, which is the language that we want for the snippet, and then the body, which is the code that is part of the code snippet. Now, that is really cool and maps a lot to what all the other static site generators do. Something you either don't see in the others, but if they have it, it's really clumsy. Including code from a file. Because who wants to have all your code right in the middle of a Markdown file? Sphinx can include a file using literal include. Can you do that in MyST? Can you do it in Markdown via MyST? Of course, it's just another directive that gets exposed within the code fence syntax. The literal include directive. It's a directive with an argument. It can also have some options. These options can be expressed in the reStructuredText syntax with : or, as we saw before, in YAML syntax. That's what I prefer. So that's code block. That's literal include. Is there something bigger than that? Something that can automatically document my code? Yes, Sphinx has AutoDoc, and it's available when you're using MyST and using Markdown. The example here shows a Python class. And so it's in the domain of Py, it's a class, and then some syntax that points at the dotted path to the file. This is just the tip of the iceberg for what is possible with AutoDoc. Lots of other examples, but as a note, it's not for doc strings. They still have to be in restructured text. Sphinx has a lot to offer, and thanks to Chris and Chris from the Executable Books project with their myst-parser and all the layers underneath it, you can tap into all of that power that's in Sphinx that's been there forever, and now you can do it from within the cozy, nice confines of Markdown documents and its syntax. There's so much more that we could cover. Chose to leave it out. Front matter, which for me is personally kind of exciting, a way to put structure about your documents at the beginning of your files. You're probably familiar with front matter from Jekyll and Hugo, the YAML that you put before your Markdown. Substitutions, which let you have really a powerful syntax for reusing snippets of information, content, even configured directives within one document or across your entire site. You can also do includes. If you've got a bunch of Markdown that needs to be on every site, maybe the footer or something like that, you can move it out of the template into Markdown and use include syntax to have a snippet that is shared across all of your documents. And then the big enchilada one, which is Sphinx, isn't just about generating HTML. You can do PDF, you can do man pages, lots of different kinds of outputs. You can still get that with MyST and Markdown because, as we said before, it's just docutils under the covers. So a lot of cool things that we can do beyond just generating the website. Lots that you can read as well. Plenty of docs and information on the Sphinx website, on the MyST site. Love the MyST website. They really wrote it up really well. You can also take a look at all these presentations over the years. Brandon Rhodes has had great tutorials at PyCon about Sphinx and stuff. That all applies here because Markdown is now just a parser syntax that feeds into Sphinx. Also in May, I'm going to be working with Michael Kennedy and Talk Python Training to announce a course on this, static websites with Sphinx and Markdown. So go over to his website, take a look out for it. What's the future on all this? Well, there's kind of a couple of futures to talk about. What's the future of Sphinx? What do we want? out of Sphinx? It's an open question. Do we want it to just be docs? Or do we want it to be for entire websites in modern web? Which brings us to the question about what do we want for Python in the modern web? Do we want it to be more competitive with these front-end solutions? All of this kind of brings me to my closing point. Sphinx is heroic. It's been doing this year after year after year, bug fixes and bug fixes. Now we can do static websites with Sphinx, thanks to the Markdown integration, and thanks to the work by Chris and Chris for the myst-parser. Thank you for watching this presentation, and thank you for going to PyCon.